Lying in plain sight is an education system in crisis where dozens of children with additional needs do not have a seat in the classroom.
We don't have a choice where our child goes to school. If he was a neurotypical child, his automatic right is just there in front of him. You can pick and choose what school you can go to.
Irish schools are at breaking point, desperately trying to divide a dwindling number of teachers and special education hours between an increasing number of special needs children.
We're operating here trying to help every child in the school to reach their potential, but we are operating with our hands tied behind our back.
Hundreds of Irish teaching posts lie vacant, and those that remain are under intense pressure and spread too thin.
People are leaving the profession because they just can't take much more.
The result is that children are falling through the cracks.
This is a huge crisis and a hidden crisis. These are our children, these are the future.
These children have become adults and they'll be asking the questions of, where were you? Why did no one speak up for us? It's a scandal of the 21st century in education.
Hello and welcome to this special Virgin Media News podcast, which is a companion podcast to our documentary Ireland's Education Crisis, which is available on Virgin Media Play. And I'd recommend that you watch the documentary before listening to the podcast. I'm Paul Quinn. I'm joined by Mairéad Cleary and Daire Furlong, who worked on the documentary. Hello, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. How are you?
So why this story?
Well, this is a story that really comes around every year, I think, in the news cycle, unfortunately. So for myself, anyway, it actually is funny. Both of us came from different angles with different pitches that blended together to create this documentary. So it started for me during the summer when we had these protests in Dublin, where a crowd of parents from Dublin 15 who had children with additional needs, many with autism, and they couldn't get a school place. They were protesting day in, day out, and they were telling us about the fact that schools are being sanctioned to create a space for their child, and that when that happens, sometimes the resources given to schools aren't appropriate because those sanctions are made very last minute. So schools aren't really prepared for the additional needs of these children. So I started to wonder, I suppose, what's the story with schools? How is this going to affect these children going forward? So I thought about, it's hard to put all of that into a 1.5 minute package. Can we expand this into a full documentary? So I went forward with my pitch, basically focusing on the children and focusing on the parents. Little did I know Daire was working on her own pitch.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of mad. So I've just been hearing for years about from friends, from family that are teachers, that are working in the education kind of system, that there's just things that they're just under fierce pressure. And the more I looked into it, the more I realised, this is not just a few bad schools or a few, people just giving out about work. This is nationally, this is actually systemic. And I suppose then I pitched that just how there's 1,000 teaching posts up this year. Teachers are leaving in droves due to stress, due to a lack of supports on every level. And so I pitched from the teacher's point of view, and then as Mairéad was saying, while this was happening, those protests started to begin, and that's when both of our ideas were put together.
Because you mentioned, Mairéad, we do hear about it all the time, and education is a story that we often cover, but sometimes special education gets overlooked. Why was it important to focus on special education and how special education is allocated here in this country?
Well, that was one of the things you wanted to kind of scratch the surface on, because like I said, in a 1.5 minute report for the news, for example, you can't get into the weeds of how the department allocates resources, how those resources are passed on to children. So I suppose it was very important to get deeper into, we've heard the emotional stories of parents, we want to highlight those, of course, but we also wanted to highlight the systematic issues that sometimes we can't get into in a very short report. So this was kind of an opportunity to really delve in. And also the number of children with additional needs is growing. Even if there are extremely long waiting lists to get diagnosis, they are growing all the time. So we knew that this problem was getting more severe, especially when we knew there's a teacher retention crisis. So it was like two heads coming together. And like you said, we often talk about teaching and education as a broader issue, but really honing in on the special education aspect was important to us.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's numbers rising, and it's numbers everywhere. It's across mainstreams, across special schools. And this is it's all children that will be affected by the lack of support. And it's not just one little issue in a mass. This is the issue of education crisis. Everything comes back to this: the lack of supports for teachers to care for these children, it's affecting the teacher, and it's affecting the children, and it's affecting the parents, and we just need they need it. We felt that it's almost like the government is chasing their tail on this. Like, you can see that the numbers are rising and rising and rising, yet it's only now, like we're saying with the Dublin 16, there's a protest over the summer, and schools were getting sanctioned and only had 6 to 8 weeks to prepare and create a unit in a school. How does that work? And I suppose that's what we wanted to dive into, that, like, how does it work to set up a unit, to get a teacher in there who, by the way, they did not get specialist training. Some teachers have told me they only had a semester in college. And so you're told, okay, you have a unit, you're going to take care of these children who have a range of additional needs. You don't know what additional needs they're going to have. You're in this unit with them with 2 SNAs. And there you go. That's it. You have 6 to 8 weeks to do this. Like, okay, off you go. How is that fair on anyone? I understand that you have to set these up, but again, it is chasing tails, or our principal told us they have to be reactive. They cannot be proactive at any point. And that is just putting a strain on every single part of the system.
There has been undoubtedly an increase in the number of children presenting with special educational needs in our primary schools, not just in Lockmore, but nationwide.
And the reality is that while there's been a tiny increase every year in the amount of resources nationally, it isn't spread evenly in any way, shape or form. And the amount of children with additional needs has increased far, far in excess of the amount of resources that are being added. Children are receiving less supports than they were 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think what Daire, you were saying there about it being, that's why we call it the education crisis and not the special education crisis, because the impact it has on a broader school, on teacher burnout, on parents, on the relationship between parents and principals, for example, if a parent may not be happy with the SNA hours their child has been allocated, that kind of tension. So it really, it's not a special education issue, it is an education issue as a whole. And also we wanted to highlight the fact that sometimes there's an issue really about collecting data from the department's point of view, that oftentimes they haven't sought the data of what needs children have and what additional needs children have. And there is a thinking out there that if they were to gather all that data, the amount of money that's needed to put in all the resources that is needed would be astronomical. So we really wanted to highlight that this isn't just a small quarter of the population. This is it's a wide scale problem.
Absolutely.
Did you find it hard to get people to talk? Because often when we're covering stories, these are big issues, but these are people's real lives, and they're their children, who for many of them they've been fighting for years just to get them the basic rights. Did you find it hard for those people, for the teachers as well, because they're in a tricky situation? This is their job, and they may have certain feelings on how things are being worked out. So did you find it hard for people to talk on the record in particular?
Absolutely. I think we found a lot of principals were quite outgoing, which was lovely to hear. But for the likes of teachers, and understandably so, they are very happy to talk anecdotally. But at the end of the day, they are the ones. I know that a lot of them were worried about their teaching council numbers and about being reprimanded, because some people may not necessarily be as understanding to what they're experiencing, and it is they are very less likely to chat, I think, to us.
Yeah, and even some teachers were saying that they're experiencing burnout. And interesting, a lot of younger teachers were saying they feel like their school is part school, part hospital, and this isn't the job they thought they had signed up for. And they were leaving. They're the stories you kind of hear typically about going to Dubai, going to Australia for different opportunities. But those are the teachers that were happy to talk to us off the record, but on the record they were hesitant because if they ever come back to Ireland, will this affect their employment opportunities? So it was interesting. We, of course, got principals, and thank God we did. They were fantastic contributors, but we couldn't get teachers as easy to speak on the record.
And I think we've all spoken, and we all have friends. We have friends who are teachers who have emigrated or gone to different countries. And look, a lot of people will go because they want to experience Australia or Canada. Absolutely. And that's fair enough. But there is, I think, an increasing cohort in recent years as well who are just so frustrated with the way things are here that's a bigger driving force for them to move overseas than just, the sunshine and the beach.
Absolutely. There's a reason why the likes of nurses and teachers are leaving. These are caring, loving people who want to give and give and give. And they're part of a system that takes advantage of that keeps pushing people and pushing. Then you're pushing the people out that are the best for the job. We need to take care of our teachers. We need to give them supports. We need to give them training, because there's so many people out on stress leave and as well, there's just so many things happening. Like, these are people that are educated people that got, like, with other crises going on, with a living crisis, that they can't get out of their parents' bedrooms as well. Like, and then they have to go into work and they are stressed out of their minds. It's just, we need to take care of these people in order to take care of the children as well. It all comes back to the kids at the end of the day. And the teachers want to help them, the principals want to help them. I'm sure the government does want to help these children, but we need to do it now, and we need to start talking to the people, as the principals say, on the ground, because you see across the country, they're taking matters into their own hands. Like, we were talking to an SNA from a special school in Kerry, and they don't even approach the government anymore for help anymore. They are building themselves. They had to fundraise for an occupational therapist. They had to fundraise for a speech and language therapist. Their own buses. They're training themselves. Like, that's a real indictment on the system. They shouldn't have to do this.
And even there was cases of school secretaries helping SNAs. I mean, that is, what if anything goes wrong in that situation? You know, who's in trouble there? What's the insurance policy there? Angela Dunn, the principal of Lockmore NS, who spoke to us in the documentary, was talking about moving training. Moving and handling is called. And it can be very difficult. Again, another insurance nightmare, a safety nightmare. But if you don't have that training in place and you have a child who needs the help of being physically moved, be it to the bathroom, outside, different situation or different position, if you don't have that training, that child still has to be moved. So it puts people in really precarious situations, and they find themselves doing stuff that they're not really trained for.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Daire, where people are they're nearly not approaching government officials. They're just kind of getting on and doing it themselves. And you see, and we see in the documentary where parents, in particular of children, taken to the streets and protesting. Any protest I've ever covered, the people will tell you I don't want to be here. Yeah. They don't want to be on the side of the street holding a placard. But that's literally what they felt they've been reduced to do. Oh,
absolutely. And I think Katrina put that very well in the documentary, that she said she's not particularly media friendly, but she's had to force herself to be media friendly because this is the plight of her son that she has to carry on. She carries a huge placard of her child. Even in her house, there's a sign up at her house with that boy Rian's face on it saying, I deserve a school place. So these aren't people who are looking for any kind of ulterior motive except to get their child the entitlement of education.
It's the basic rights is what they want.
Absolutely.
They don't want anything and above. They
Not
just
at all.
Basically what the kids are entitled to. I know when you were editing the documentary, and I would have had conversations with you, and you were just like, and you mentioned right at the top, like, it's very hard to fit everything into a minute and a half or a 2-minute news package for the day. I'm sure there was so much material that literally just didn't fit in the documentary as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it's almost 30 minutes is not enough to talk about it. It's more than 10 years of issues that have been under the ground. Like, even posting like on this on social media and stuff like that. I have so many teachers liking our posts and stuff, and they're saying thank you. Like, they're saying thank you for looking into this, because I feel like they've just been, as a word that kept coming up, gaslit throughout. And again, because we had 30 minutes and we put everything we could, this is primary schools. At the end of the day, these children that are not being looked after now, they're going to go into secondary schools. And secondary schools is a whole different ballgame. I was talking to a teacher, and she said that 25% of her first years, this is anecdotally, that have additional needs, meaning that she has to make, for those 25%, an individual curriculum for every single one of them. She has no training for special education. And she has hundreds of other students as well. She has no extra supports. So, and it's going to be on a massive scale. This needs to be addressed now, because primary schools, that's one issue. This is going to be the big issue in the next few years, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger unless it gets sorted now.
And that's the way the demographic is going, that primary schools are a larger cohort at the minute, but it's moving into secondary schools just due to birth rates, really. But even I was talking to a parent of a child who has autism, who was graduating from a 6th class at a graduation ceremony, And she said it was so heartbreaking because he was old enough to be aware that he was different from everyone else, and that when everyone else was talking about where they're going to go to secondary school, he knew that he didn't have a school place. Now, thankfully, he has got a school place since, but that day he was aware that he was different, and he was aware of why he didn't have a school place as well, which is twice as heartbreaking. So, I mean, it's a situation, and again, it keeps going. Those kids in secondary school are going to graduate from secondary school. We need to think long term about this.
And as well, like, it's such a shame. Like, you see, we were talking to teachers and we were talking to parents that when they did have the support, these children thrived. When they're in the right place, be it a special school, be it a unit, be it in a mainstream, or be it integrated fully, they thrive once they have the right supports. And it's just such a shame that their potential is being lost. Like, it doesn't make sense economically even to not give these children these supports so they can't be the very best they could be as adults. It just does not make sense to help them now.
And that's, from you guys you've worked on this, you've come up with this idea, you've pitched this idea, you've obviously spoken to people, but can you imagine the frustration as a parent of someone who is just desperately trying to find a place for their child? Was there anything that, just didn't make the cut ultimately in the documentary that if you had more time or something that stood out with you?
We could have delved into the teachers leaving the profession more. As we said earlier, that could be something to do. It would be fairly difficult to get teachers because although teachers leave the profession, many may rejoin it. So they're a little bit cautious to talk to us. And then it was just about older kids as well was another angle we wanted to explore more. But just in 30 minutes, we wanted to keep it as focused on one topic as possible, just to make sure we're hammering home the important headline issues, I suppose. And we're hoping it does actually make some difference to these families who got to know on a very personal level.
Absolutely. It was so rewarding, and I'm so grateful that we were given the opportunity to do it, and that we just pitched from two angles, and it just so happened that we were put together. It was a lovely team to work with as well, and so rewarding, and it was just so eye-opening because I've said I only heard anecdotally from people, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And I just couldn't believe how big this was and how intricate this was.
Yeah, you think you know the story, I think, until you really delve into it and you do the research and you have those long conversations that sometimes, as I said, news doesn't allow. That's when you realise what a mammoth issue this is.
And ultimately, as you said, this is about, and why we do this kind of thing is so that there will be change, so that things may help, that the focus is on an issue like this and people at home will be watching it and think, wow, we need to put more pressure on the people in power, the people who make those decisions to try and get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and Hildegard did put it well, that we do need a culture change. These are not just these are children with special needs. These are children. These are children that need support. And there are children. They are they're not different.
No.
This is not an issue we have to put to the side, which we've done in the past for many, many years. This is a part, they are part of our society. They are loved. They are, we need to see this as an issue for everyone. This is not a very small little issue. It's, as one principal said, it's a hidden crisis that hopefully we can see now that it's actually much, much bigger and it affects everyone.
Absolutely, I concur, to be honest. And even the contributing members of society, Simon Lewis, the principal of Educate Together, and Carlo said it in the documentary, that the number of children who will drop out if they don't get the support, and it could be as simple as mathematics and literacy in 2nd, 3rd and 4th class. That could help them stay interested in education, keep them on board. But the dropout rates in secondary school could be higher if those kids don't get that early intervention. So he said it's not always about children with severe needs. It's just someone who just needs a little bit extra help, a little bit extra support in school. And if they don't get that, the societal impact is major. You're someone who didn't finish secondary school, who might not get a job they have the ability for, and then the knock-on effects from there on. So as we said, it's a societal issue. These are contributing members of society that deserve to be looked after.
Well, Mairéad Cleary, Daire Furlong, thanks very much, and well done on the
Paul.
documentary as well. And don't forget that this special Virgin Media News podcast is a companion podcast to that documentary, Ireland's Education Crisis, which is available on Virgin Media Play.